Hi, I'm Naveen Day. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Nova Scotia RCMP have scaled back a massive search for 2 missing children, saying there is little chance they are still alive. Plus, Albertans weigh the pros and cons of separation from Canada. We hear from those in favor and those against. And tensions escalate as Pakistan vows retaliation to Indian airstrikes that killed 31 people.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks so much for joining us. Police in Nova Scotia are scaling back their search for 2 missing children, saying there's little chance they are alive. The RCMP say the active search will be reduced to concentrate on more specific areas, including places that have already been looked at. 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan were reported missing on Friday morning after the 2 reportedly wandered away from their home in Lansdowne Station. RCMP spokesperson Carly McCann says search over the last 6 days has been an all-hands-on-deck operation.
There's been an absolutely incredible turnout from the GSAR teams across the province here in partnership with the RCMP and other resources. I do know that there's been well over 100 every day. The outpouring of support from so many volunteers who've given up so much of their time to be here has been incredible, and I know it's been a great support to the police on scene with this goal that we all have.
Prime Minister Mark Carney held a phone call with the country's provincial and territorial leaders today to brief them on his first meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. The 2 leaders met yesterday at the White House to discuss U.S.-Canada relations and the ongoing trade war. Here's what Ontario Premier Doug Ford had to say following the virtual meeting.
We just had a great conversation with the Prime Minister and all the premiers. We all congratulated him on his victory, but also congratulated him on how well he did yesterday and the restraint he showed. I don't think I'd have the restraint that he had yesterday, to be very frank, but in saying that, I think it's a good start on a new relationship. I saw President Trump said really kind things when he just tweeted out, so that's good. It's good for the country. It's good for the U.S. Had an opportunity to speak to the U.S. ambassador this morning and get his take on things. I think everyone's feeling relatively good on the meeting yesterday.
Carney and Trump are expected to meet again in person in June when Carney hosts the G7 Leaders Summit in Alberta. And speaking of Canada-U.S. relations, Premier Smith has named Nathan Cooper as Alberta's new representative in Washington. He replaces James Rajat, who served in the role for 5 years. Cooper was previously Speaker of the provincial legislature. Canada's energy CEOs want the Prime Minister to take action to support the oil and gas sector. Nearly 40 leaders of Canadian energy companies have signed a letter that pitches 5 suggestions to support investment. They include overhauling the government's impact assessment process and reducing regulatory timelines to get projects completed faster. They also echoed Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who has called on Carney to eliminate the emissions cap on oil and gas production and the industrial carbon pricing system, arguing that the provinces should be setting carbon regulations. The Alberta government is looking to eliminate municipal codes of conduct, formalize rules around party finances in local elections, and develop rules under what conditions it can use to amend or repeal a municipal bylaw. Those are among the changes proposed in Bill 50, the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act, which was introduced by Municipal Affairs Minister Rick McIver. But Indigenous groups say the bill, if passed, will prevent the ability of status First Nations people to vote in a municipality they reside in.
But when you look at the demographics, look at Treaty 6, look at Treaty 7, now all of a sudden you ask yourself, where is our voice? If I'm 1% of all the First Nations in Alberta, well, where is my voice? I want my voice to continue on. I gave my support and endorsed the mayor that ran for the municipal election the last time. How am I going to endorse him and vote for them this time? That's taken away from me because of the legislation that lies within the province of Alberta. And if you want to take it a step further, I think it's a slap in the face to the First Nations. Takes us back to 1956 where we were not allowed to vote.
At that same press conference, Indigenous leaders responded to questions from the media, including about possible separation and demands to cease all development and exploration projects should Alberta separate.
The Premier wants to separate with Alberta or Albertans. Well, if you want to separate from Canada and you still have exploration rights, why should we allow you guys to continue to explore within our traditional territories if you want to leave? Pack up your bag and go. That's my message to the Premier. You're not welcome here anymore.
The Chiefs had emergency meetings yesterday with the Treaty 6, 7, and 8 of Alberta. We're very concerned about the rhetoric around separation because it fundamentally forgets that we are the rightful owners of this land. They use the words like sovereignty. Sovereignty is not a word that belongs with Alberta. It's our words. We're the only ones that can use that word. There's nothing sovereign about Alberta, and there'll never be anything sovereign about Alberta.
Prior to today's First Minister's phone call, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Ontario Premier Doug Ford have been exchanging barbs, with Smith talking about a potential citizen referendum on separation. Ford says Canada needs to be united to fight U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. Smith says she doesn't tell him how to run his province, and she expects that he won't tell her how to run hers.
Well, Doug and I have a great friendship. We don't agree on everything. In fact, I think we supported different people in the last federal election. And so we don't have to agree on everything. But what I will say is we have a constructive conversation at the coffee table. I continue to look forward to having a constructive conversation with him at the coffee table. But he's the Premier of Ontario. I'm the Premier of Alberta. We just have different issues that we have to respond to in our respective jurisdictions.
Well, I just always say, united we stand, divided we fall, and that was my message today. And let's continue making sure that we unite the country, not divide the country. And I spoke pretty strongly in support of Alberta and Saskatchewan because they've been ignored for the last 10 years. They've been treated terribly, to be very frank. And I think the new Prime Minister Carney, understands that.
With the province-wide discussion of secession taking a hold of Albertans since the election, the question on many Canadians' minds remains, is it even possible? Since Premier Smith presented the possibility of a citizen-led petition in order to enact a referendum on such question, the discussion among those for and against separation have been asking what would the process look like and what would the consequences of moving forward with such a proposal mean for Albertans everywhere. BCN's Landon Hickok has more on what the logistics behind secession would look like.
Since Mark Carney's election win last week, a growing sentiment of those who are wanting to see Alberta secede from Canada have been becoming increasingly vocal. An Angus Reid poll that was published back in April said that if the Liberals were to secure government in the latest election, 3 in 10 Albertans would be in favor of a vote for Alberta to secede and become an independent nation. Frustrations from Albertans continue to rise over federal regulations that make it challenging to export natural resources from Alberta to broader markets. But according to an economist at the University of Alberta, it may be a bit more challenging to do so as an independent country.
The primary obstacle, I would say, is that Alberta has to contend with is that it's landlocked. So it would be surrounded by Canada to the north and to the east and west, and the United States to the south. This means that to reach global markets, it has to travel through these other places, and this could create all sorts of problems. So if you want to export oil, for example, it would have to drive it in trucks or send it through a pipeline in either through Canada or the United States. So essentially, Alberta would be subject to regulations for one or both of these countries in order for it to reach global markets. So this might, in a way influence Alberta's global sovereignty as an independent nation. Canada might treat Alberta differently compared to if it's a province. The question is, in terms of long-term viability, how long could the province continue with this model? So, for example, the International Energy Agency predicts that global oil demand will reach its peak by 2030 and gradually decrease afterwards. This is just something that to keep in mind, and we're talking about the very long term, 25 years or more.
But to actually separate, the process would require more than just a favorable provincial-wide referendum. In 1999, the House of Commons passed Bill C-20, or the Clarity Act, amid the failed Quebec secession referendum of '95. It states that for a province to successfully separate, a referendum for its population must be held free of ambiguity and present a clear majority. This referendum will only begin the process of negotiations with the Canadian government and must establish an amendment to the Constitution of Canada that all other provinces and the federal government therefore must affirm. Treaty rights are an additional factor in which First Nations province-wide as of late have criticized the notion of separation as a violation of treaty rights. The Blackfoot Confederacy, in a letter criticizing Premier Daniel Smith, says that Bill 54, which would make it easier to establish the possibility of a secession referendum, would destabilize the foundational legal agreements upon which this province rests. The Premier promises that if a citizen-led petition with enough requisite votes requests a vote with the topic on separation, it will be put into next year's provincial referendum ballot. For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
The Edmonton Police Service is asking for the public's assistance in identifying a suspect linked to a series of sexual assaults in the Charlesworth neighborhood of South Edmonton. According to a news release issued Tuesday evening, the EPS Sexual Assault Section is currently investigating 3 separate incidents, 2 that occurred on April 22nd and a third on April the 2nd. In each case, a man targeted women walking alone along local footpaths. The suspect is described as a South Asian male, approximately 20 to 40 years old, standing between 5 foot 9 inches and 6 feet. He is said to have had a slim build, facial hair, and was last seen wearing a bright pink turban, a dark plaid jacket, and gym pants and with a white stripe. Anyone who may have information about the suspect's identity or believes they may have been approached by or victimized is urged to contact the Edmonton Police at 780-423-4567. As part of Budget 2025, the province is providing $47 million in capital grants to CASA Mental Health to build live-in and day program use facilities in 3 new locations. This is part of a capital commitment of $75 million over 3 years. CASA is Alberta's second largest provider of community-based youth mental health services. The funding will quadruple the number of CASA house beds in Alberta to about 80. Once fully operational, CASA House facilities will treat more than 300 young Albertans every year. The 3 new locations will be constructed in Fort McMurray, Calgary, and Medicine Hat. This is Mental Health Week, and as part of its commitment to prevent youth suicide and improving the health and well-being of young people, Alberta's government is investing an additional $1 million into youth suicide prevention grants for a total of $4 million from 2024 to 2026. Minister of Children and Family Services Cyril Turchin says the grant program has supported over 2,100 youth experiencing mental health challenges.
Through this grant, we're helping to fund more organizations across the province, 17 in total, that are focused on improving the health and well-being of young people. These organizations provide spaces for youth to make social and emotional connections, giving them a greater sense of belonging. They offer after-school programs, cultural camps, and events, as well as awareness and educational workshops. Today's youth, the pressure is greater than ever. Social media, academic stress, family struggles, and uncertainty about the future can all weigh heavily on their mental health. If you or anyone you know needs to talk to someone, don't delay. Kids Help Phone offers 24/7 support for children, youth, and young adults throughout Alberta and Canada.
Turton says groups at increased risk of suicide include Indigenous, sexual and gender diverse, those experiencing homelessness, immigrant and refugee youth, as well as those in government care or transitioning out of care. Lethbridge Police and Lethbridge Fire and EMS are reminding residents to take safe measures if you're involved in a collision even if they are considered minor. Crews are encouraging motorists to stay calm under these situations and report to a collision center if the damage seems to be over $5,000.
We want everyone to be safe, and so when we do come across a motor vehicle collision, or if you've had a little fender bender, we just want to make sure that you have like safety checks in place. Make sure you prioritize. Is it a small fender bender? If it is, make sure you see if you can clear the road, get out of harm's way. And another part is exchanging information. Sooner or later, you're going to have to exchange that information with your insurance companies. So if you can do it on a friendly basis and not point blame, but gather that information and share it, it just makes your process a little bit easier.
Additionally, emergency crews say that if there is major damage, injuries, or if you're involved in a hit and run, or if the other party seems to be intoxicated, call 911 in those instances. LPS is also reminding residents on their traffic enforcement project this summer that will have motorists that speed, stunt, race, and create excessive noise throughout the city be enforced. Since it began last week, LPS have already issued 46 violation tickets and apprehended 1 impaired driver and 1 suspended driver. Since it began in 2022, LPS have increased monitoring certain areas of the city that motorists tend to perform illegal activities, which results in increased public complaints. Police say that they will show no tolerance to offenders who commit these acts.
This is in addition to our normal traffic control and patrols as well, so it's on or above everything else that we do. So we're going to have zero tolerance with any vehicles that are caught speeding, stunting, any kind of reckless behavior in that manner. We've had a lot of citizen concerns lately, mostly Mayor McGrath, Métis Trail, Scenic Drive. So as our initiative moves forward, we're going to focus on those areas.
The enforcement project will run until September. Coaldale Mayor Jack Van Ryn has officially announced his candidacy for re-election in the October 2025 general municipal election. Van Ryn says one of his goals for the upcoming term is to ensure Coaldale continues to thrive for future generations as a welcoming and progressive community. The candidate also mentioned key accomplishments during his 2021 to 25 term.
The most exciting one for myself and all our council is the largest single investment in the history of the town of Coaldale. New Cold is a global leader in advanced automated warehouse, a landmark $222 million investment to build a state-of-the-art cold storage facility in our industrial park. And this facility will create over 50 permanent jobs and up to 200 construction positions. The official grand opening of our recreation center. Another item that's important for the town of Coaldale is a potable water reservoir and pump station. I'm looking forward to serving another term if the residents make that choice.
Van Ryn says his priorities for the next term will focus on infrastructure, public service improvements, community development, economic growth, public safety, and healthcare. Turning our eyes over to international news, authorities in Pakistan say they will retaliate after overnight Indian airstrikes killed 31 people and injured 57. India launched military strikes yesterday as tensions spiraled following a deadly assault on tourists in the disputed Kashmir region. India said it launched missiles targeting, quote, terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, a divided Himalayan territory that India also controls a section of. Pakistan's military said it shot down 5 Indian aircraft during the attack, a claim unconfirmed by India. The sun will be beaming down on us all week, but some showers are in store for us at the tail end of the weekend. A full look at our weather is coming up next.
Our 7-day forecast has us with a high of 25 for today with sunny skies. Tomorrow has a high of 22 with sunny skies. Friday will also have sunny skies with a high of 25, and Saturday will have a high of 27. Sunday will have partly cloudy skies with a high of 19. Monday will have a chance of showers with a high of 16, and Tuesday will have a high of 13, also with a chance of showers. Today's almanac has us with an average high of 17 for today, with an average low of 3. The record high on this day was set back in 1910 with 33, and the record low was set back in 1914 with -6. The sun rose at 5:59 a.m. today and set at 8:58 p.m. Our national forecast has Vancouver with a high of 13 and a chance of showers. Vancouver has a high of 13 as well, with partly cloudy skies. Edmonton has a chance of showers with a high of 16, and Calgary will have sunny skies and a high of 19. The rest of the prairies have Saskatoon with a high of 26 and partly cloudy skies. Regina has a high of 29 with sunny skies, and Winnipeg will have a high of 27 also with sunny skies. Central Canada has Toronto with a high of 14 and partly cloudy skies. Ottawa has a high of 14 as well, but with just cloudy skies, and Montreal has a high of 12 with cloudy skies. Our East Coast has Fredericton with a high of 16 and a chance of showers. Halifax has just cloudy skies with 19, and Charlottetown has partly cloudy skies with a high of 18. Finishing off our weather forecast with St. John's, we have a high of 17 with a chance of showers.
Oil sands giant Suncor says it's had its strongest ever first quarter performance in its production, refining, and refined product sales segments. Net earnings for the first 3 months of this year were $1.69 billion, up from $1.61 billion during the same period in 2024. Suncor says adjusted operating earnings provide a better comparison between quarters. That figure was $1.63 billion, down from $1.82 billion, which Suncor blames on lower crude oil sales. TransAlta says first quarter profits fell compared with a year ago, earning $46 million or 15 cents per share for the quarter. The results compared with a profit of $222 million for the same period in 2024. Sales totaled $758 million, a lower result compared to last year. Reports say the company's portfolio in Alberta was partially impacted by softer power prices. Furniture and display cases at Saks Fifth Avenue stores in Canada are up for sale. It's offering prospective buyers at least $150,000 worth of inventory, including mannequins, clothing, racks, full body mirrors, art, and coffee table and books. Hudson's Bay operates 3 Saks Fifth Avenue and 13 Saks off Fifth stores in Canada. Those are shutting down alongside 80 Bay locations as the company remains under creditor protection. And now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 186 points on the day to finish at 25,161. The Dow was up 284 points to 41,113. The S&P 500 was up 24 to 5631, and the Nasdaq was up 48 points to finish at 17,738. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.13 to $57.96 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 16 cents to $3.63 US. Gold was down $36.52 to $33.6422 US an ounce, and silver was down 71 cents to $32.45 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.84 per bushel, barley is at $6.92, canola is at $15.45, and corn is at $7.90 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was down $1.15 to $212.53. Feeder cattle were down $1.25 to $294.45. Lean hogs were down 40 cents to $91.15, and the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours at $72.30 US. Recapping one of our top stories, police in Nova Scotia are scaling back their search for 2 missing children, saying there's little chance they are alive. The RCMP say the active search will be reduced to concentrate on more specific areas, including places that have already been looked at. 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan were reported missing on Friday morning after the two reportedly wandered away from their home in Lansdowne Station. Prime Minister Mark Carney promised to make Canada an energy superpower, but is this possible with an emissions cap on oil production? Cody Battershill with Canada Action addresses this question and more on the future of Canada's energy resources. That's coming up next. And when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews. Canada has a new federal government, and for the most part, it seems to be continuing on the same environmental and anti-fossil fuel production path as before. Although Prime Minister Mark Carney is promising to make Canada an energy superpower. How is this possible? Joining us from Calgary to chat about this is Cody Battershill. He's the founder of Canada Action, a volunteer-led grassroots movement encouraging Canadians to take action in support of the natural resource sectors of our nation. Cody, great to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
Of course. Now, why don't we start by touching on green power? Recently, we saw massive blackouts in Spain and Portugal, where there were failures in the solar-powered electricity generation plants. Both of these countries are majorly pushing for net zero, much like we are here in Canada. What can we learn from this?
Well, we have to learn that having access to 24/7 reliable electricity is something that we take for granted, but it doesn't come without risks. If you're not investing in having that reliable baseload power generation, if you're not updating your power grid, your power transmission lines. And the reality of solar and wind is that while they've played a massive growing role in meeting growing energy consumption, they are still intermittent. The wind does not always blow and the sun's not always shining, and in some countries more than others, of course. But if you don't have something to back up the wind and the solar, now the backup could be a battery. I don't know that we're quite there yet at the scale that people are talking about. You know, to imagine having a battery big enough to back up an entire city for a really crazy storm for an entire week. You know, I don't know that that technology exists yet at cost or at scale, but you need to have baseload power backup. Now, is backup a battery? Is backup going to be a natural gas power plant? Is backup going to be coal power in many parts of the world still? So it really just highlights that in Europe specifically, you know, it's been said that Europe's going to need to spend $1 trillion or more on batteries, on new transmission lines. And, you know, it highlights for us that we need reliable 24/7 baseload, affordable electricity. Wind and solar can have a role to play, but maybe we want to be thinking about what's going to back that up when the weather's funny. And, you know, if we can afford to build wind and solar, but then also build a natural gas or nuclear or other power plants to provide the same amount of electricity that we're not using 24/7. And that's where the cost equation can get a little interesting. So it really just highlights, again, everything in our modern society. It's energy, it's oil, gas, it's power, it's electricity. And globally, coal is still at a record all-time high, coal consumption. So it's an interesting conversation for sure.
So do we know if the federal government's plan is to keep natural gas power generation available as a backup to green power? You know, like you talked about the intermittent nature of wind and solar.
Well, yeah. And I mean, in Canada, we're lucky to have so much hydroelectricity. Like 60% of our power nationally is from hydro, and then about another 15, 18% is nuclear. Then we have a lot of natural gas, and we're fortunate to have so much natural gas. We're fortunate to have all of our resources. We need to utilize them. We need to use them. We need to make the most common sense choices to, you know, have reliable energy, reliable food, reliable clean water, everything that underpins our modern lives at a cost our communities can afford. So Canada today is about 9th in the world for installed wind capacity, but we still are going to need backup unless we're going to be building those batteries. And I don't think the batteries are quite there yet at cost. So we need all of the above. And we need to be pragmatic in how we build it, thinking about cost, thinking about, you know, supporting our communities, keeping the lights on.
That would also make our energy grid much more robust, too. Now, where are we headed in Canada with the Prime Minister's plans to go ahead with net zero electricity generation for all of Canada by 2050? Is this doable? And if so, what would the cost be to the economy?
Well, what we've seen globally is we've seen a lot of big plans like that have been scaled back or rolled back. And I think in Canada, if we are pragmatic, if we are realistic, if we are supporting all energy sources, there's ways that we can work towards certain goals without sacrificing, for example, our citizens' right to choose what kind of vehicle they drive, for example. And whether or not everyone should be driving an electric vehicle in the winter is another conversation. Where those electric vehicles are made, it's another conversation. So there's many different parts and components to this. I think it's great to have these big plans, but are they real? Are they reasonable? Are they realistic? Are they cost effective? And we've seen a lot of changes globally. So Canada needs to make sure that we are. I think there's some great stuff in the oil sands, for example, that we can advance with carbon capture, and there's some other great plans that exist that we can work together on. But nationally, let's make sure we're competitive to attract investment in all resources. Let's advance our clean technology, research and development programs that we're already leading the world in many different metrics. And but let's be reasonable and let's look at what's happening around the world, and let's not be an outlier where we're too slow, not attracting investment, not building projects. I think really the last 10 years would show us that we've lost a lot of investment in natural resources. And nationally, our quality of life has suffered on many social metrics. And we need to kind of get back to that focus of building. Being pragmatic is really, I think, the most important thing.
Solar and wind power generation is called green, but I'm curious to learn how green is it actually? Can you explain to what degree CO2 is emitted with solar and wind power?
Yeah. I think we have to be honest as human beings that every single thing we do has an environmental impact. The clothing that we are wearing came from somewhere, and the food we eat, and the water we drink, and our homes, our gadgets, our cars, our holidays, our sports, everything is made from the material world. And so a wind turbine doesn't make a wind turbine. To make a wind turbine, you need coal, you need steel, you need oil and natural gas, you need lubricants, you need heavy machinery, you need massive cargo ships, you need mining, you need all of those different resource inputs to make that wind turbine. So, and then does a single wind turbine last as long as, let's say, a natural gas power plant? And typically, no. A wind turbine might last 10 to 15 years, maybe even 20 years, but a brand new natural gas power plant might last 45 or 50 years. So you might have to replace that wind turbine 3 times in the life cycle of that one single natural gas power plant. We have to think about all these different inputs and how much steel and coal and fiberglass, and then how do we recycle? How do we reuse? Where are we burying these things? And again, everything has an impact. Even hydroelectricity, when you flood the land to create the dam, there's an impact. You're flooding that land. But we gotta, as Canadians, work together, I think, to make smart choices so that we have, again, a strong electrical grid, so that we don't have something happen like that just happened in Spain and Portugal. We have affordable electricity. Look at Germany. Germany's electricity costs have skyrocketed the last 10 years. They have seen a massive deindustrialization. And what that means is massive manufacturing operations have left the country, have reduced their shifts, have stopped producing because the energy input cost is too great for them to be competitive globally. And there's a lot of other examples, warnings for how we balance these things. So let's advance wind and solar, but let's be reasonable and pragmatic. Let's also make sure that the electricity is affordable. We're supporting investment in all forms of energy, and we're not, missing our opportunity with growing global oil and natural gas demand locally for reliable energy that's cost effective, and also internationally exporting to, reinforce our economic security at home.
When you were talking about lifespans of wind turbines, it kind of brought to my mind, growing up in our parents' homes, like the fridge, the stove, the washer, the dryer, they would last like 20 years. Like you would never replace those. They would just be diehard. And now we're replacing those like every 5 years, every 10 years. And it's crazy. Now, on that topic, though, are we still burying huge amounts of old wind turbine blades and towers in the ground once they're worn out? And if so, why do they need to be buried?
I think it's a very complicated manufacturing process. And, again, that speaks to how much mining and oil and gas and petrochemicals are involved in the, construction and transportation, installation, and then decommissioning of those products. About 80% of the world's solar panels come from China. So those are made in China. Now, what is powering the factories that make those solar panels? There's been many reports that said a lot of those factories are powered by coal power. And there is still growing coal power demand globally. So as Canadians, one pragmatic solution is to export as much liquefied natural gas as we can to make sure the world has access to many different suppliers. They're not reliant on one supplier that might not be reliable. And then maybe bring the costs and the guarantee of that supply, so that countries like Japan and South Korea and China and all these other nations that have said they want our LNG, so they can choose to maybe build natural gas power plants instead of coal power plants. And at the same time, when we're looking at, wind and solar, that has a role to play. But when those products are at the end of their life cycle, certainly, we need to continue to figure out how we're going to recycle, how we're going to reuse. Like there's a lot, like our electronics at home are nowadays often, some of them, unfortunately, I think end up in the landfill, and some of them are recycled or they're sent overseas to be recycled. But it's just crazy to think that your TV might end up, it comes here on a boat and then you use it and then it goes somewhere else on a boat and then it's dismantled. It's very complicated. So again, everything has an environmental impact.
Now, you had a poll done recently which showed that 68% of Canadians think Canada should make a greater effort to export our energy. Question is, if our federal government doesn't build a coast-to-coast pipeline, will we be able to expand our exports?
Well, this is really the head scratcher, is that as a country, we have the world's third largest oil reserves, but we are reliant on 500,000 barrels of oil imports per day, mostly out east. Ontario's reliant on a pipeline that starts in Canada, but goes through the US to get back into Ontario. And, we have to think about our energy security. We have to ask ourselves, why are we buying oil from Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, the United States, all these other countries, when we have our own oil? And, Energy East would have seen that conduit, that pipeline built from Alberta east. It would have also led to more updates and investments in refining so that our refineries could process our oil. And, the energy ecosystem is very complicated, from production to transportation to refinery, back to the gas tank or back to the petrochemical facility that makes all the products, the inputs for the products in our homes. It's very complicated, but as Canadians, we have to be talking about building more export capacity, reach Asia, to reach India, to reach Europe, to get ourselves less reliant on the United States as a single customer. And we also have to be absolutely talking about how we get more Canadian-made resources to Canadian consumers in other parts of the country. It's a wild stat. Canada has imported something like $500 billion of oil in the last many decades. And we have our own. Wow. So I think we need to be thinking about nation building.
So my follow-up question to that is, what's the point of building pipelines if there's an emissions cap, which is essentially a production cap?
Yeah, the production cap is very concerning. And many independent third parties and industry associations have come out and said, if this happens as proposed, it will be a production cap. So let's be clear. Let's also be clear that we're the only country in the world talking about doing this. We are the world's largest democratic holder of oil reserves. The world needs our energy. Europe's asking, Asia's asking, many countries are asking. We're also the top supplier of oil to the United States. If they don't buy it from us, they buy it from other countries that aren't as friendly. They don't do as much trade with. That's a whole nother discussion. So yeah, why would we limit any Canadian-made resource or product? Like, why would we limit Canadian vehicles? Why would we limit Canadian tourism? Why would we limit Canadian food production, forestry production, mining? Why would we limit Canadian energy? It's our largest export. And as our largest export, it helps us bring in money to pay for all the things we import. And that's really, really important. from an economic balance standpoint and from a foreign currency standpoint, supporting the value of our dollar. So the production cap makes no sense. We are an outlier. We're the only country in the world doing it, according to Minister Guilbeault. And it doesn't make any sense. It needs to go. It sends the wrong message to investors, to companies, and to workers about this pragmatic approach that we need to have, supporting all forms of energy, and recognizing that our economy nationally is not looking too great. We really need to, get all hands on deck here. And oil and gas is a massive economic engine that is irreplaceable. And global demand's growing, so let's make the smart decision.
Cody Battershill is the founder of Canada Action. Cody, thanks so much for your time today.
Always. Thanks for having me. Appreciate your time.
With the arrival of summer, many of us look forward to summer camps for our kids. Joining me to talk about the benefits of summer camps is Tanya Martins. She is the program manager of Southern Alberta Bible Camp, located near Lomond, Alberta. Good to have you with us, Tanya.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Tanya, can you just tell us what the SABC, Southern Alberta Bible Camp, is all about? Can you just give us a general overview of what happens at summer camps for those who have never been to one?
Absolutely. Summer camp is a great space. It's a space for adventure and friendship and fun. And at SABC, that is all focused around faith. There's kids stay in cabins. They do all sorts of activities. We're a waterfront camp. We're on the Traverse Reservoir, which is where Little Bow Provincial Park is, and on the other end of the lake. And so there's big games and great food and new friends, and lots of cool, amazing stories about who God is.
And what age groups does SABC work with?
You betcha. We have camps that range anywhere from kindergarten to grade 12. And so there are 8 full weeks of summer camp, and every given week there is pretty much potential for a family who has kids, maybe if they're ranging from anywhere from grade 3 to grade 10 or 11, all of their kids could attend at one time in various different parts of the camp. And so we try to make space for every family to find a place to belong.
And then how do families go about registering their kids, and what are the costs?
You betcha. We have about 1,000 campers already registered, and but there's still room. And there are various camps that are actually filling up. And so with those various ages per week, families can head to the website, sabc.ca, hit the summer camp at the top, and then you can peruse all the different camps that are available, the ways they line up with the different ages. And then there's a registration button that's there. And if you're curious on pricing, our pricing has a variety of layers. And so families can pick what works for them. We do not want cost to ever be something that would keep a kid from camp. It's one of our deep values at SABC, is that we would never turn a kid away for that reason. And so there are various layers of what works for you, as well as there's subsidies. We're in the middle of fundraising and stuff for an event called Ride for a Reason, and that actually raises funds to help kids get to camp. And so, we don't want your kid to not have a chance to come to camp because of finances. And so sabc.ca has lots of great information about the camps available, how to register, and what the costs are.
And what are some of the sports and activities you offer to the kids? Because you're located by a lake in Lomond, Alberta, so there must be some water activities too.
Absolutely. We have a ton of land fun and a ton of water fun at SABC. So on the land, there's things like bubble balls and a climbing wall and this giant swing,
Cool.
ceramics and archery, as well as super fun kind of hands-on building stuff for those kids that like to get their hands on making something. And then on the water, there's kayaking and water skiing and canoeing and paddleboarding. And we also have an aqua park with a blob and a giant slide and a jousting beam, all floating on the water. And so it's a pretty great place to be.
Now, your camp is obviously a Christian camp, but I understand that you do get quite a number of non-Christian campers as well.
Yeah, we sure do. And we love the opportunity to invite every kid to camp and to come and experience the fun and adventure that summer camp offers kids today, and to have the opportunity to share a little bit more about who God is and what Jesus has done for them and how loved they are exactly as they are. And that's the big reason why we exist.
Right, because with some kids who have never got to know Christ, you have a great ministry opportunity there. So do you have any stories of lives being changed?
Oh yeah. Our vision is to see lives transformed by God through the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so that's the hope of all of our conversations, and the fun that we have is wrapped up in that. And there was a camper last summer who came to camp, much like you said, not coming from a faith background and actually pretty opposed, like didn't really want to have any conversations about who Jesus was, wasn't really interested in being a part of the chapel time and those conversations around the Bible. And so the cabin leader was just like, well, let's just spend some time together. And so through the week and towards the end of the week, this kiddo said, hey, I actually want to know some more. And as they got to talk about who Jesus is, this camper gave their life to Christ. And that's such a cool thing. And we get these kids for 5 days and then we send them home. And sometimes we never know what the impact of that is. We have the privilege of knowing from this camper that they went home and were so changed and transformed that they told their family all about it. Obviously, they're going to talk about all the fun they had. But that family is now connected to a church and going to church and finding out together about who Jesus is and how that matters to who they are and how they live their lives.
Wow, that's just so really cool to hear. Now, can you tell us about the Telios Leadership Program and who is it for?
Yeah, it's such an amazing part of our summer. It's actually for students who are finishing grade 10 and finishing grade 11. And they come for a whole month at camp. We have support staff that come to camp, and they're high schoolers that come and serve in our different departments. The Telios program runs sort of alongside that. And these students come and they live in a really tight little community. And they spend 2 weeks doing team building activities and sessions. And I don't want to give too much away because it's some pretty great trade secrets in there. But it's all about learning more about who you are in Christ, learning more about that, as well as the leadership and team development. Then they get to spend a week as a young cabin leader, serving at different parts of camp, and so it's pretty cool opportunity. It's a very transformative for the 4 weeks that they're there, and they often go on to continue to be part of our staff and go back to their homes changed. And now where our girls are full in Telios, it's maxed out, but we have room for boys to come. So if there's guys out there who are grade 10 and finishing grade 11, there would be amazing to come and help fill spots up.
So it sounds like lives are being changed after attending camp. But other than spiritual growth, what are some of the other benefits of summer camp? Do you find that the kids become a bit more independent and mature?
Yeah, it's really quite amazing. The opportunity for families and kids to come to camp and have that experience. So, like, they're living in cabins and they're going to activities and they're following a schedule. And then there's free time and there's decisions every morning what they're going to order from the tuck shop. And so, kids getting the opportunity to spread their wings a little bit in this world in a really safe environment, trying hard things, learning to get along with kids that are different than them, listening to new leaders in their lives, asking good questions, having a way to maybe consider a different perspective. And so those life skills are so transferable to everything else that they're going to do. And to get to partner with parents in that way and help them grow up their kids a little bit and to send them home in a way that helps those families grow together is yeah, there's such a ton of different ways that kids can benefit from camp. Even just being outside for a week, unplugged from phones and technology and just playing as a kid is foundationally beneficial to the kids of today.
And as adults, we often forget how tough it is to be a young person these days. And when kids are at camp, you may encounter like kids dealing with issues of bullying or some abuse or some negative influences. How is that dealt with, and like how does that when it comes out at camp?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, when kids are struggling with those things, it can come out in a lot of different ways. And then in particular when they're putting together a brand new or new can be stressful for kids too, right? So camp can feel a little bit stressful for kids. And if they are walking with some of that anxiety or self-esteem challenges or things like you said that are happening at home and they come to camp, um, it can come out in a way where they are really shy and struggle to connect. Or they might act out and be resistant to some of the fun that's there. And we do a bunch of training with our cabin leaders. We have layers and layers of staff that are trained to befriend these kids and invite them in and to be curious about their story. And yeah, and there's a trajectory of when we hear a hard story or we're walking with something that's challenging, two kids not getting along, as simple as that. Who do you go to? You have a cabin leader and they have cabin circle directors. And we bring in a little team of people called camper success coaches, and they're there to help our campers have a successful week. We even have a camp grandma and grandpa because who couldn't use another grandma and grandpa in their life?
Of course. Now,
Right?
now what about self-esteem? Do you see some changes in this area after camp?
Yeah. And honestly, kids, I think coming through the last few years, have more worry and more sort of insecurities about what it is to step out and to be confident. And so having that opportunity to walk with kids and being like, you can try this, you can do this, and helping kids redefine what success can look like. If they've never done archery before, the bullseye is not the only aim. It's about, hey, did you try something new? Did you learn a new skill? Did you actually help somebody else? Did you feel encouraged? And maybe that, and we see that it helps kids be like, maybe I can try the next thing tomorrow. And maybe I can have that conversation. And maybe I am going to be okay. It's huge. Was having a conversation with a staff member last night. Um, who whose life has been transformed by being on our staff team, getting to impact the lives of kids, and the compounding of different weeks and years at camp on the life of a young person is immeasurable. And she's a teacher now, and so she is
Wow.
impacting kids in another way. So it's so hard to explain how powerful it is. For the self-esteem of kids and young adults and teenagers that summer camp can be.
Do you still need volunteers to help out this summer?
Absolutely, absolutely. We need guys. I have a really, our support staff, so our high school students are almost all full. Such an incredible thing to have high schools who are going to come for 2 weeks and scrub toilets and mow lawns and take pictures and do dishes and cook food for volunteer, and that's amazing. Our cabin leader area has a little bit of room. We definitely need some guys, cabin leaders, to come and be a part of young boys growing up to be young men and to come and be a part of impacting them through courage and conversation and adventure and faith. And so we definitely need some guys to come and join in the life-changing possibilities that happen at camp.
Any final thoughts for anyone still considering going to a summer camp this year?
Absolutely. Just do it. The opportunity for a kiddo to try something new in a safe place, to be like, to maybe learn something about who they are, about how big the world is in a safe and smaller way, as well as to learn about God and who he is. And because of who God is, they get to learn something really deep about themselves. I would say just come and do it. We work hard to create a space for kids to come and have fun, to be a kid, and to learn about really important and incredible stories. And so, absolutely, just come to camp.
Tanya Martins is the program manager of Southern Alberta Bible Camp located near Lomond, Alberta. Tanya, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much. Have a great day, and maybe we'll see you at camp this summer.
Maybe. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.